Hello guys, and welcome back to Learn with Lightning, this performance analysis series that we're running out for you. I hope you guys all had a really good week. I hope you're all well. And I really hope that last week's session came in useful for you. Hopefully you managed to learn a little bit about what performance analysis was and the context that surrounds it, that's kind of started us off on this little journey over the next couple of weeks. There's been some great feedback online so far, which is really encouraging to see. So thank you very much for that, and I hope that the remainder of the sessions will continue in a really positive way to get you guys up to speed with exactly what performance analysis is and how to do it. I've mixed things up a little bit this week. I've moved into the kitchen, had a really exciting change, and also braved a lockdown haircut, which I don't think ended too badly. So we're in a pretty good place to crack on. So week 2 then, and this is what I'm really excited to bring you guys, because it's the first time really I'm going to give you a proper behind the scenes look at exactly what it is we code at Loughborough Lightning, and some of the processes, some of the data that really drives what we do. So really excited to bring this to you over the next few minutes. So what we're going to focus on specifically today is talking through the process of how to select what you should be analysing. There's a whole host of different things we could look to analyse in netball, and I'm going to give you a bit of a guide of how to narrow that focus and how to decide what are the most important things. Like I just said a moment ago, I'm going to share some examples with you of what we do at Lightning. So I'll share some of the data types that we utilize, and also some anonymized data from some of our matches of both ourselves and our opposition, to give you a little bit of an insight into actually what do those numbers look like for real. And then finally, having done that and showcased you some examples, we'll then talk about preparing yourself to actually undertake this analysis for real. And one of the most important parts of that is obviously making sure that your analysis is reliable and accurate. So we'll go through that shortly to make sure that we're ready to go for the following week. Okay, so first off then, let's consider this question. What data should we be collecting when we're doing performance analysis? Now, broadly speaking, there are 2 widely recognized data types in performance analysis. They are video analysis and notational analysis. These are the 2 types of data that are collected most often. There are others, but they're not used as widely. So we're just going to focus in on these 2 to start with. Video analysis, pretty self-explanatory, as you'd probably expect. So video analysis is the collection of video footage from a netball game, from a netball training session, and you could do that in 3 different ways. You could either do that live at the venue yourself, so with your own camera setup, be it your phone, an iPad, a HD camcorder, some of the more advanced kit that we would use. That's one way of getting it, so we would call that live video analysis. The second way you could do that is to get it from broadcast feeds. So as you guys all well know, some of our games are on Sky, and we are able sometimes to access Sky's footage, which is great because it gives us another way, different angles of analysing our footage. And thirdly, you could look to archive footage. And this is probably the one that most of you guys are going to be able to draw upon the most. So you might have on your iPad, on your phone, whatever it might be, some old video footage of a training session or a match that you either took part in, you coached yourself, you were there as a supporter, that you want to do some analysis on. And we would refer to that as archive footage. So something that's happened in the past, you've got stored away that you want to do something with. So having got that video footage from one of those sources, we will then do something called notational analysis. In very simple terms, notational analysis is the collection of numerical data, so objective data, which we talked a little bit about last week. And this numerical data will be from that one performance that you are looking at. So it might be from one training session, one match, whatever it might be. Notational analysis will allow us to gather some numbers on what has happened within that performance. Now, as part of this mini-series, we're assuming that you guys have probably got your own video, or maybe some video of another team off YouTube that you want to have a look at and have a go as analysing. So rather than us talk through the process of capturing video analysis live and things like that, we're going to jump a stage based on the fact that we think most of you guys will be working off archive footage. So we're going to focus in really closely on notational analysis and a process that we refer back to as coding. So for us to be able to collect this notational analysis data, we use two different types of indicators. And I'm going to define and give you some examples of those right now. So the first one is known as a performance indicator. A performance indicator, in its very simple terms, is an objective variable used to assess a performer's performance. Now, to unscramble that a little bit, what we're talking about here is some kind of number that can tell us something about how good someone was on a particular aspect of play. So I've used a goal shooter as the example to give you guys here. And one thing we might want to know for a goal shooter is how many successful feeds they play into the circle to their goal attack. Okay, so one performance indicator that you could have for your goal shooter would be the feed success percentage rate. Now, that is nice to know for a goal shooter, but you're probably sitting there thinking already, well, that's not necessarily critical to the role of a goal shooter, and you're absolutely right. So what happens here is we bring in something called key performance indicators. So a very subtle distinction, but a very, very important one. So a key performance indicator is something that is deemed fundamental to success. If you can't perform this indicator successfully, the risk of you failing in your position or your team is vastly amplified. So the obvious one there that you'll all have in your heads already will be the shooting percentage. So as a shooter, if you're not able to successfully score your goals from your opportunities, then you're going to have been classed as failing in some way, shape, or form on that particular indicator. So key performance indicators, then something that you absolutely have to be able to do if you want to be successful. Okay, so that's your absolute need to know information. A performance indicator is nice to know information. It's a supplementary bit of information that might not be absolutely critical, but it might be interesting to know and help you make some decisions. Now, it's important to say that both these types of indicators can be done for individual players, so all 7 players, or all 7 positions rather, within a netball team. You could have a set of performance indicators for each of those. You might also then have a set of performance indicators for each unit. So the defense unit will have a set of indicators, the attack unit will have a set of indicators, and you might then also have overall team indicators as well. So it can get quite a bulky long list depending on where the focus of your analysis is going to lie. So how on earth do we decide what to collect and what indicators are really important to us? Well, to do that, we start with a very, very simple question. Before anything, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to know about this performance? What is the key question I'm trying to answer? And then we work our way backwards from there. So this guiding question that we come up with should be the basis of all the analysis that is done. All the indicators that are selected are as a result of this question, and all analysis decisions are based off of this initial question. So it's really important that right now, if you want to pause the video or if you want to do it after we finish the session, is think about, for the PA you're going to do, what do you need to find out? What do you need to know about that individual goal attack? What do you need to know about that wing defense or that attack unit or the team overall? What is the question we are trying to answer? I'll give you an example of one of ours in just a sec. Once we've got that question in mind, we're clear on it, it's been agreed, then we can really start to think about what we need, so which performance indicators we need to answer that question successfully. So this is the example question, one that many coaches, players, fans, parents alike will be very, very familiar with. And this is where we're going to work our example through for the next couple of minutes. So question is, how successful are our center passes? That is the set question we've gone with. So to answer that question, we would need to know two things. Number one, we would need to know the raw number of center passes taken. So that's one thing in itself. We would have to record via notational analysis the raw number that we have. The second thing we need then is split into three, and that is the outcome of that center pass. Typically, there are three outcomes to every center pass. We can score it, we can take it to a shooting opportunity but not score it, so that would be the second one down, to shot, or the center pass might break down before we even get a shooting opportunity. So what we would do in this case is start to record then the outcome of each of those center passes taken. So for example, the first piece of data we collected was the number of center passes taken. There might be 50 in a game. So we might then have 30 which is scored, 10 that go to a shot, totaling 40, and then a further 10 that don't go to a shot at all. We could then work out very quickly some percentages of the number of our center passes that go to a goal, to a shot that isn't scored, and resultantly the number that don't go to a shooting opportunity at all. And that would help us to answer this question of how successful we are. Now, it's something I'll come on to talk about in a little bit more detail later around the reliability, but you might be thinking, well, what do we really define success as? And this is a really tricky question to answer. For some coaches, for some players, a center pass is only successful if it is scored. So it gets right the way through, however many phases it takes to get there, and it is scored from that shooting opportunity. Other coaches, other players might say that actually a successful center pass is just one that gets to a shooting opportunity, regardless of it being scored or not. So really important, the distinction between what you class successful as. At Lightning, we will class a fully successful center pass as one that is scored. It's our given possession, as we call it. It means we scored that, and that's a great outcome for us. So that's success for us on our center pass. What we might also want to know, though, is some additional information on top of that to make our analysis a bit deeper and a bit more in depth. So some of the other things you might think about adding on, some of the different performance indicators or key performance indicators that you might want to add on, are listed down here at the bottom. So for example, we might want to know particular locations. So where does our phase 1 ball land? Where does our phase 2 ball land? Can we get depth into the pocket on second phase? Let's try and record that information because it might help explain this idea around success on center pass. We might want to know the particular players involved. So who takes our first phase? Is it our wing attack? Is it our goal attack? Or actually do we look behind and go to wing D goal D on occasions as well? So we can record that. We might think about the number of passes. Do we take 10 passes to get the ball to a shooting opportunity? Or do we take 3 phases? Can we take first phase wing attack, second phase goal attack, third phase goes into our goal shooter, and be really direct in how we play? So sometimes we might log the number of passes to get there. And then something else you might want to consider is rebounds. So if you take the second outcome here, where it goes 2 shots, but it isn't scored, it might be really important that we log if we have won the rebound opportunity, if in fact one presented itself. That might be another really, really important thing for you to consider in answering your question. So initially then there's this descriptive information that we can provide, so the number of an event that's happened and the outcome of that event. After that, we might be able to add some more detail and depth through the additional information at the bottom. You're going to have to repeat this process until you've selected a list of indicators, both key performance indicators and performance indicators, for every question that you guys want to answer. This could end up in a very, very long and detailed list, depending on how many questions you do want to answer. And to give you an idea, give or take in elite netball, we could be looking at 80 or more indicators in total. So an awful lot of information, an awful lot of notational analysis data that we're going to be collecting. Obviously, if you have fewer questions that you want answers to, the number of indicators will come down accordingly. It just depends what you're trying to answer and how detailed you want to go with your analysis. Now, as a result, if you've got 80 plus indicators, you've got loads of questions you want answering, that's going to result in a lot of what we call coding. So that's the notational analysis part, and actually logging all of these events as they happen. When we do that, we need to make sure that we're logging all of that data securely. That's not something that we're going to go into in any great detail on this mini series now, but it's really important, obviously, to make sure the data that you store is secure, to make sure that nothing gets into the wrong hands, doesn't get to the opposition, things like that. So make sure whatever you do, keep it secure on a password protected laptop, hard drive, etc., to make sure it's nice and safe. Okay, so the result then, and this is where I'm really going to share some real inside information on what we do here at Lightning, stuff that's not normally seen anywhere else. We will combine all these things at Lightning together. So we have a whole host of performance questions that we want answering, and as a result, we have all of these different performance indicators that we code during training and matches for our different age groups. This is a very broad overview of what that might look like. So, as you can see, there's an awful lot of data on this spreadsheet. Now, the reason why this is so zoomed out right now is just to show you the size, the scope, and the scale that we will go into with what we can collect. I will go into some more intricate detail of particular indicators in just a minute, but hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of how broad analysis can be, but actually how informative it can be to making a real difference on our performance levels moving forwards. You might notice down on the left-hand side, about halfway down, you've got the different colors where you can see red, amber, and green. What we do there is something called RAG rating, so red, amber, green, and we will set our players as individuals, as a unit, and as a team targets of where we want them to hit to be successful in their next performance. That's based on longitudinal data, so data that's being logged by myself and my fantastic team for about 5 years or more, where we know roughly, give or take, if we hit X percentage on X indicator, we're more likely to be winning netball games. So that's what the log does down there with the different colors. So here's another example then. I've anonymized all of this, so you don't know which team this is. It could be us, it could be an opposition. That part's not really relevant, but the data is probably the interesting part to you guys. All I will say is that this isn't a current season, this is archive footage from a couple of years ago. So in terms of the kind of stuff we will collect at Lightning then, you can see some examples within here. And I have to stress, these are only a couple of examples. There are so many more that we do. All of these ones are team indicators right now. So we will class these as team indicators right the way through because we believe that everyone has an impact into them. So shooting, although it's very much an individual based action on our goal shooters and goal attacks, it is also the responsibility of our defense to turn ball over, our mid-court to get ball to circle edge and to feed it before our shooters then hopefully finish the job. So we still class shooting as a team indicator because it's really important that we acknowledge everyone has a role to play in that. You can see the basic way in which we work it out. So if we look at that top line, we've got 67 shots were taken in this particular match for this particular team. 57 of those were scored, resulting in a shooting percentage of 85.1%. And you can follow that down and you can see the various different percentages that we've got. Move across and we look at that center pass idea. So the example that I showed you through just a few minutes ago. So again, if we use that top line, we can see in this particular match, we had 55 centre passes. Of those, 80% or 44 in raw numbers went to a shooting opportunity. But unfortunately, we missed a couple of those shooting opportunities. So it turned out that only 38 of our centre passes went to goal, which is 69%. And you'll be able to see the fluctuations in the different indicators along the different rows in this Excel spreadsheet. You can see we've got, in terms of centre pass to shot percentage, which I'm looking at now, first one is 80, it goes as high as 91, and then we drop into 70, 77, 74 in some occasions. So there's a real fluctuation. Oh, and a 66 at the bottom there. So real fluctuation in some performance indicators. And that is absolutely natural to happen. The opposition have a huge impact on how we play and our style. So that might be just one of many, many reasons of why those numbers might fluctuate. Possession-based indicators then, quite self-explanatory, these ones. We log every pass in a game. So again, use that top row. 544 passes were completed in this game by this team. They had 15 passing errors, which results in a pass accuracy of 97.3%. They had 3 further unforced errors. So that's things like offsides, footwork, held ball, things that are unforced. They haven't been forced into making that mistake. And you can then see the percentage of possession, the percentage of possession, as a percentage, but also the raw time that they've had the ball for as well. And then a little equation that we use to do something called pass tempo, which is the number of passes per minute. So that's team-based and unit-based stuff. We also look at individual players. So me and my team will log a huge number of players, both our own players and opposition players, so particularly important opposition players to us, and log all of their actions. So again, this example here, everything's been anonymized. It's not necessarily one of our players, it could be an opposition, but again, it's old data from a few years ago, just as an example. So this is the example. You can see the number of games played. So this is what we would call a longitudinal analysis. So each row represents a different game. And you can see the different indicators that we have logged for this particular person on an individual basis. At the bottom, you'll see where we've got the 51.5, that's the total, and that row represents the total that that person has taken over all of the games above. Again, quite self-explanatory. You probably don't need me to go through that in a lot of detail with you, but it will really give you an idea of some of the individualized stats that we will code to get an idea on how well our own and our opposition players are performing. Okay, so one of the most important things to do then is something called reliability analysis. Now, as we said in week 1, because coaches will make decisions with the data that we present to them, when we go through this coding process, it's our responsibility to try and make sure that it is as accurate as possible and it is as reliable as it possibly can be. There's several errors that you could make when you guys start to code up, and indeed me and my team will still make mistakes now, but we absolutely try and keep them to the minimum. So one such error that you might make would be a definition error. Now, this is something that's really, really common, and I talked about earlier in regards to how you would class a successful centre pass, for example. What one person thinks is successful might be unsuccessful to someone else, i.e. that idea of to shot or to goal. It just fluctuates between coach to coach, player to player. Other things are going to happen around that at all. Or all the time, sorry, I should say. So it's really important that one of the first things you do as an analyst is sit down with all the coaches, all the analysts, and go through and have a really clear definition of exactly what every single performance indicator is defined as, so we can iron out those errors straight away. Second thing you might do is something called an operator error. Now, this is where the person collecting the data using whatever system it might be, and that's what we'll look at next week, records the event as something else. So they might accidentally put a centre pass for lightning as a centre pass for thunder, for example, if we were playing those guys. And that obviously then means that data is incorrect. Another one they might do is they might record the person incorrectly. If you've got two players who look quite similar, they maybe have exactly the same trainers on, hair is in the same style, then it can be quite difficult sometimes, especially if it's opposition players that you aren't so familiar with, to get the names spot on. So very easy to record it as something else, and then your stats are slightly inaccurate. And then finally, observational error. If you switch off for a minute, if you lose focus, you might miss an event entirely, which again is going to throw your stats out a little bit. So it's really important then, before we start to go and actually do this for real, that we try and guard against these kind of errors. And this idea of reliability has to be at the forefront of what we do, to ensure that when coaches do use this data to make decisions, it is actually accurate and reliable. So like I said, next week, we're going to look at how to physically record and code these indicators. But before that, a little bit of homework for you. I want you guys to do a couple of things, just as me and my team would do before we get to that stage. Number one is to define all of your indicators. So list out all those questions you want answering, list out both your key performance indicators and your performance indicators in turn, and get a really clear definition written out for them. We have what we call data dictionaries at Lightning, where we have every single indicator with a full explanation written out of exactly what that is. So if you want to go to that level, by all means do, to make sure it's nice and clear. What I would suggest to help with that process is to cross-reference it with someone else. So if you've got a sibling, mum, dad, daughter, whoever it might be that plays netball and is also knowledgeable about netball, then you might want to ask them what they would define it as, and make sure that you're both on the same page so that it's nice and accurate with your definition. Second thing, this is especially important if you're doing live analysis, but just as important if you're doing it after the event, is thinking about your environment and where you're actually going to be able to code. You need to try and minimize the distractions that are in the environment in which you're working. So when you guys do your analysis as of next week, once we've talked through some of that, it's you guys thinking, where is physically the best place for you to sit down and do this? If you've got a study, if you want to lock yourself away in your bedroom for an hour as you do it, where you're not going to be distracted, that's probably a really good place to do it. If you think on a match day, however, if we're doing this live, me and my team, then we've got all the pyrotechnics, we've got the music, we've got you guys in the crowd making a huge noise and cheering Lightning on. That can be potentially quite distracting. So that's something that we have to cope with, and we have to come up with strategies around to make sure that we are accurate in what we do. Because ultimately, the data that we code live is used live by the coaches down on the bench, as we discussed last week. So we need to do all we can to think about that environment. And finally, third thing you can do is watch a bit of netball in the next week before the third in this series comes out, and try and spot the indicators as they happen. Don't worry at this stage about coding anything or noting it down anywhere. Just watch the game and start to coach yourself to watch netball in a slightly different way. As an analyst, you often can't enjoy the game. You can't enjoy watching it. Instead, you have to watch the game via the events and think, right, centre pass, shot, rebound, turnover, tip, etc., etc. So watch a bit of netball over the next week and try and get into the mindset of watching it as an analyst rather than as a fan. Not an easy thing to do. Okay, so in summary then, two main types of data that we've got: video analysis data and notational analysis data. Your notational stuff is your objective, factual stuff that we ourselves will code up. Your video analysis is your evidence, if you like, in the video that shows us what happened. We'll use both performance indicators and key performance indicators to answer our performance questions. You might only have one performance question. That's absolutely fine. You might have 10, 20, 30, 40. All that's going to do is mean that the number of indicators change and increase. Very, very quickly, as you saw from what we do with that screenshot, you'll very quickly compile huge amounts of data. And we need to start considering what we do with that. And that's what we'll start to look at next week. Just keep that log of it, like I said, and make sure that everything you're doing is nice and accurate. As I said, make sure it's nice and accurate, and a little bit of homework with those 3 things for you guys to think about over the next week and prepare yourselves for that before we start to do this for real. So talking of that then, next week, we're going to start to bring your analysis to life for real. So we've talked a lot about it so far. We've talked about selecting indicators, making stuff happen, but we're really going to do it next week, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'll share with you different methods, different technologies that we can use to code your indicators up to actually collect them. We'll also start to think about how effectively we are reporting this stuff back. So we'll talk through things such as the balance of text, the data, the numbers that we provide to them, but also the video side of things. How much video do we provide, and how do we get that balance correct in order that we can actually impact a subsequent on-court performance? It's a really, really important part of PA. So thank you very much for listening again, guys. I really hope that was useful for you. Do let us know if you have any questions. Drop us a line, and we'll try and answer those for you. If not, I look forward to seeing all of you guys next week when we start to do this stuff for real and explore coding. Have a great week, guys. Take care.